This week on the Superhuman podcast.
Supply chains are really key to fighting climate change, and up to about 90% of their carbon footprint actually sits in their supply chain.
Revolutionise how industries manage their emissions and their footprint.
There is this whole freight train of compliance coming to decision makers in organisations. They're going to need to report and audit on their supply chain.
What are we talking in terms of how it's done now, and then what does the world look like with Impact Chain?
We've built the world's first AI in partnership with Superhuman that takes the complexity of the supply chain and all of that operational data and easily integrates it with the ESG principles.
This week, we're joined by Lauren from Impact Chain. Impact Chain is a New Zealand startup doing some amazing things in terms of leveraging AI to support businesses with their carbon emissions reporting. Sit back, enjoy, and happy Easter. So Easter is coming, and what better way to celebrate Easter than talk about carbon emissions?
Of course.
Of course.
Goes together.
So Lauren, welcome to the podcast. Me and you have known each other for a fair while, and you've got a pretty impressive history, which has led to where you are right now, which, as you brought me up to speed with the work that you're doing at Impact Chain, which is your business, you're founder of. I thought it'd be awesome for us to unpack how you are leveraging AI in partnership with us, actually, to revolutionize how industries manage their emissions and their footprint. Very, very complex problem. So how have you got to, where did you get to with Impact Chain? How did you get here?
The journey with Impact Chain it's kind of almost the culmination of my entire career. I've spent my whole career at the forefront of innovation and technology within supply chain and logistics space. And at Impact Chain, we're on a mission to help transform one of humanity's most important industries, being the global supply chain. So for me, Impact Chain is a real celebration of the innovation that I've been part of in this amazing, complex, important industry, and then thinking about how I can apply technology and specifically AI in a way for good for the future of that industry.
It's knowing a little bit about supply chain and the complexities that go with it, and literally in some supply chains, thousands of parts that are moving all in harmony. The ability to report on your carbon footprint as a business that has to now report on your carbon footprint, it's not a small problem.
No.
And I think it's just very fortuitous timing, I think, with the fact that your history and the fact that now AI is taking away that need to necessarily have all of that institutional knowledge around legislation and go, okay, cool, we can apply legislation and data at the same time and really, really dramatically reduce the cost of ESG reporting. So talk us through what businesses need to do in 2024 around the term that I just mentioned, ESG, and walk us through what ESG actually means for New Zealand.
So I think the first piece is, how big really is the problem, and supply chains are really key to fighting climate change. And the reason for that is for most organisations, up to about 90% of their carbon footprint actually sits in their supply chain, and collectively that makes up 60% of global emissions. So it's a fairly huge problem. But what you talked about is that, there is this whole freight train of compliance coming to decision makers in organisations. They're going to need to report and audit on their supply chain, which is fairly significant. And that is what you were calling before, which is the ESG Scope 3 reporting, which I'll touch on shortly. But actually, just compliance isn't just around those mandatory type of reporting. It's also going to be really mandatory in the way that we trade, both domestically and internationally, because it's been demanded that your trade partners want to see what your footprint looks like across your supply chain. And notwithstanding, of course, consumers are expecting it. Consumers want to see how their products that they consume every day travel through a supply chain. So it's vitally important that organisations start looking at it now, but it is really complex. So what is ESG? Probably is a good place to start. So ESG is essentially a way of organisations globally, a standard way to measure their impact on the world. So what it considers is how eco-friendly are they? So that's the E, the environment. How do they treat their people and society, which is the S, the social, and how well are they run, which is the G, the governance. And ESG, when you look at it from an emissions perspective, just to make it even more complex, it has 3 different scopes to it. So scope 1 and 2 is what, the emissions and that relate directly to your organisation. So scope 1 is your own environment, moving to, say, lights when you need them to turn on.
Direct control of
just direct, yeah. Right. So that's fairly easy for an organisation to report on. And in most cases, scope 1 and 2 with the direct control, you can do it yourself, and many countries have already made it mandatory. So it's commonplace, or it should be commonplace now. But scope 3, which is the real complex side that we're trying to solve through the power of AI and our industry knowledge, is looking at your entire supply chain, both what we call upstream and downstream. So that means how materials, your raw materials come to you, right through to how your products are consumed. So it's a fairly significant and wide problem. And the Scope 3 mandatory requirements to report on that will be coming. So it's a big, gnarly problem to solve.
So if we are seeing a freight train of compliance coming for New Zealand businesses so they can be compliant and trade in an environment where it's just necessary to have that level of reporting, how is it done now? So for businesses that are investing in actually being compliant, which not everybody is, it would seem, what are we talking in terms of how it's done now? And then what does the world look like with impact chain?
So how it's being done now really depends on how much money someone can throw at it. So the real challenge is being able to get that level of visibility across all of the suppliers in the supply chain. And, to throw some stats around, 85% of organisations have limited to no visibility past their direct suppliers. So when we're talking about needing to be able to report on, suppliers going multiple levels of depth through your organisation, through your supply chain, that gets almost impossible. And in fact, I read something just last night that said an average supply chain has over 150 categories of products and can span over 100 countries. So imagine all the suppliers in that. So today, most of that is being done manually when it is being done. Spreadsheets, those kind of things, which of course you can't really do at scale. And the real challenge with that is you cannot do it at the moment in time where the key decision has to be made. You're doing it looking retrospectively and often, sometimes even annually. So that real pace of change, and, think about how big this problem is to solve. 60% of global emissions come from supply chain. And if we're just doing manual expensive reporting and looking back at last year to make change, it's going to be a very slow change. The piece where it gets even more complex is, let's say you've got all of that data. So you've got all of what we call it primary data, which is essentially the real operational activity that happens in your supply chain. If you've got that, now how do you turn that into something that you can build into every single decision? So a decision today is made on just time and cost. But if you want to make it balanced, so it's looking at time and cost, like your profitability, and also looking at your environmental impact, and in future looking at your social impact, how do you do that? Because it's not just getting that information, you've got to match it to your ESG categories. There's 15 categories, and in some of those categories, the calculations, there's multiple ways to calculate. So it's very, very difficult. And so most organizations today, the big organizations are either employing a whole lot of people or leveraging consultants, which is at great expense, or they're smaller organizations, they're just not able to do it. So how are they going to compete on a world stage?
And time and expense, obviously, there are two parts of the equation. You mentioned then bringing in the I guess, the benchmarks and or the standards that a business should or want to meet from a ESG perspective, which I think historically, more like a greenwashing category from maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
There was it was kind of a nice to have motion when everyone had a lot of money and the economy was in a different state. When the pressure's on for businesses and every dollar counts and every dollar of GP counts, there are going to be incentives going forward to choosing ecologically viable suppliers, and not everyone is, but you do need to have a keen eye on three of those, because again, it's as we enter into 2024 and beyond, that whole notion of being socially competent, socially compliant, and environmentally compliant, it's not going to be a nice to have. It's going to be a mandated. It sounds like it's going to be a mandated place to be as we go forward. So expensive consultants coming in, looking historically. Impact Chain is both solving that problem from a historical reporting perspective, but also helping you make decisions into the future. What does that mean for the supply chain itself in terms of what they need to be doing to be part of this, what feels like a network, to help them save costs from a supply perspective and for the people who need to do the reporting as well?
So firstly, what we've done at Impact Chain to deal with all of that complexity and that time and expense that we've been talking about, we've built the world's first AI in partnership with Superhuman, of course, that takes the complexity of the supply chain and all of that operational data and easily integrates it with the ESG principles and the complexity there in seconds and at scale. So that really changes the whole topic for organizations, because what that means from a going forward position is all of the time and expense and looking back, it kind of vanishes really. What we're talking about is saying, now you can use our recommendation engine that takes that information and at the moment in time when you should be making it, which is usually a procurement decision, a buying decision, a distribution decision, you can make that decision with recommendations from Impact Chain that does still look at time and cost, because we consider profit to be an important part of the balance of impact. But we'll also look at the environmental and the social side of those decisions and recommend to you the best decision based on what's important to you as an organisation. So if you think about where suppliers need to, what suppliers and organisations can do to be getting involved in that, they can shift their focus from how we are going to solve this problem and work out what our footprint is and deal with that going forward, to really be thinking about how do we provide the right level of information into a solution like Impact Chain today, and essentially just provide our operational data. And once that information is integrated, then the rest of it is taken care of by that culmination of AI plus the industry experience that we've brought together in this solution.
It's interesting that the reporting element of it is the status quo. That's how it's always been done. This is how we're going to go and do it. And then you get to that magic point in time where you've spent, $200,000 with a big consultancy firm, and they go, cool, here's your retrospective looking impact report. And then you've got to go into the decisioning process. But by that point, you're already well into the new financial year. Things are already moving and the report's technically out of date. So you're paying a lot of money to get to the report. Actually, you've added no business value. You've just maintained compliance.
Correct.
And this leads me to kind of the forward-looking view of Impact Chain, of when you have the world supply chain using Impact Chain and the customers using it to report on their impact, you essentially can benchmark yourself about how good you are in the scheme of your competitors and or other markets, etc. So walk me through what that looks like at a macro level of how businesses can take advantage of being in an ecosystem where all supply chain is technically managed from an ESG perspective, and how that rating can really advise them on how competitive they are when it comes to supply chain management.
Yeah, sure. And perhaps to do that, I'll give you a real life example of how we're using Impact Chain with our first MVP customer, which is really exciting. So what we're using for our first customer, who are a sourcing and distribution company. So they've got a lot of government customers, and they are being asked by government to report out on their carbon footprint for the work that they do for their customers. and also being, from a broader outcome perspective, being asked, what are you doing about it to improve it going forward? So for this customer, what we've been able to do is use the AI at the absolute point of decision making. So how they operate is the customer will place an order for some print. So they do small format digital print, like the leaflets and things that you see around. At the moment, our customer, what they will do is go out and ask for quotes across their suppliers, and they'll make a decision in their head based on what they know about costing, timing, where they are, all of that sort of stuff, and they'll choose a supplier. And that supplier will often also govern the type of logistics that distribute that. How that's totally changed on its head now is when the order comes through, the AI will actually recommend which supplier to choose. And it will do that based on a number of factors. So it will continue to look at time and cost because it still is a relevant factor, but it's going to look at the carbon footprint that it will take for that supplier to actually execute the work. But it'll also look at the preference of that supplier. So how ready are they? Are they giving us real-time information that makes their readiness score, if you like, higher, so they become a more preferred supplier? Are they actually also using Impact Chain, which makes the whole process really easy, which again would uplift their preference as a supplier? But the third view to that becomes really interesting is how have they shared with us ways that we can engage with them around buying behaviours that actually promote more positive impact as well, because that should also be taken into account. So, for example, have you got a product that if we bought it in bulk, it would have more positive impact, and therefore, if we know about that, then the AI can start not just recommending which supplier to choose, but can also start recommending behaviours to engage with that supplier that are more positive. So there's a real incentive for suppliers of an organisation to get on board with this because it's going to uplift their preference as a supplier of choice. But then they're also going to experience this problem themselves as far as they're going to have to report on their suppliers. So if they're using Impact Chain, and then they get their suppliers to use it, and then it becomes a domino network effect for which everybody's getting the benefit of sharing the information and making positive impact.
I think that the important thing to realise in the business environment of which ESG has been a kind of, yes, it's been there, but it's been a nice to have, and now it's becoming a highly regulated, highly mandated piece of legislation, is that the suppliers, customers, and the end-to-end supply chain and logistics of all of those products has to be doing this. Mm-hmm. And on the basis that they have to be doing it, they're going to be looking for a way to reduce the cost of it and create the efficiencies of it. And it's going to become a competitive marketplace.
Huge.
Massively so. I think it's good to see that the global supply chain is going that way in terms of like a unified global legislation, which everyone's signing into, which is great. And you're starting to make some really good progress now with your first anchor customer. So congratulations on that. But in terms of the business cycle for Impact Chain, you're about to go out and start to continually grow the business. Mm-hmm. What does that look like for the next 3 to 6 months of Impact Chain? Mm-hmm. How are you looking to grow, scale, and continue to drive the impact that you're doing?
Sure. So we've got what does it look like? Very busy, which is excellent. The real focus for us over the next 3 to 6 months is really focusing on our anchor customer and delivering Impact Chain into that environment, but then also looking at the fact that they've got 300 suppliers and they've got about 80 customers who all share the same common problem. So we'll be looking at not just solving the problem for our anchor customer, but then looking at that real network effect. So how can we engage with the suppliers and the customers and start spreading our wings across their ecosystem? Secondly, the other really exciting piece is that we've also got our first anchor partner. So Impact Chain isn't just a solution that just sits directly with customers. How it will become very powerful is through its integration into ERP solutions and procurement and distribution solutions and warehouse logistics solutions. So our first anchor partner is a procurement and distribution platform. So over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be integrating directly into their platform and then start rolling that out across their customers. The other piece to it is we're really excited to be accepted into the Ministry of Awesome Electrify Accelerator. So that's specifically designed for female founders. And that actually starts just the week, we're in Easter, damn it.
Starts next week.
Starts next week, right? So, so the Electrify Accelerator starts next week. So for me personally, that's something that's I'm really looking forward to be surrounded by other amazing female founders and getting the mentorship and accelerator experience, which is something that's new for me. So
great.
From a traction perspective, we've got a lot going on. Being able to really tease out both the anchor customer and anchor partner ecosystems is going to tell us a lot about what our growth strategy looks like, particularly when we're going into international markets, because supply chains are not just domestic.
Yep. So we've got moving to a highly regulated market, which is going to create a lot of demand.
Yes.
Customers are looking to reduce the cost and remove the complexity of being compliant for Scope 3 reporting and getting insights from that. Now you're at the stage of a minimally viable product with your first set of anchor customers and anchor partners. You're about to open a round to support that next level of growth as well. And I think it's fair to say that investor interest has been hot around the work that you're doing. So just talk us through how you're approaching that round and the kind of investors that you're looking to in the process you're going through over the next couple of months with closing that out.
Yeah, so for us to really accelerate in that growth strategy, a capital raise is really important. That's the next step. So we're going to be opening up a round within the next couple of weeks. So just after Easter holidays, we'll be going out to market. We'll be really targeting investors who want to get in early on a problem that, as we've outlined, is a really big, audacious goal that can really affect humanity globally. So it's a really exciting, big problem. We've got the MVP ready, the anchor customers ready. We've got an amazing team as well, which is so important at these early stages. Our team is all industry professionals, been involved in supply chain logistics. And then we have partnered with yourselves at Superhuman to bring the, out of this world AI expertise. We've thoroughly been enjoying our partnership and really bringing this to a capital raise. So we're going to be doing a fairly short, sharp raise, and that'll be open for about approximately 3 to 4 weeks through the month of April, and looking to secure a raise from, angels, VCs who are going in that really early round, and any high net worth individuals watching the podcast today are most welcome to tap us up as well.
Great. Well, look, Lauren, it's been fascinating for the team at Superhuman to work on the problem with you, and I think we've made some really big strides to solving it. In fact, we've solved the first problem, which is reporting, and we're really just excited to go on the journey with you. Good luck with the raise. Thank you for tackling this problem on behalf of everyone that has it, because I feel like there's just a lot of value that people are going to unlock, and ultimately saving Kiwi businesses and international businesses a lot of headaches and complexity with becoming compliant.
Yes.
But ultimately that's going to lead to a more environmentally successful ecosystem.
Correct.
So thanks for joining us. Good luck with the race, and let's get back to work.
Indeed. Thanks for having me.